I stood there, trembling as my family laughed, completely unaware of the bomb I was about to drop. My sister, who had everything handed to her, was flaunting her five-star vacation like it was a badge of honor. Meanwhile, I had spent years scraping by, ignored, belittled, and dismissed. But today, I was about to make them regret every single moment they'd ever looked down on me. I wasn't the failure they thought I was. I was the one who had been quietly building an empire in the shadows. And now, it was time for them to realize just who they had been laughing at. I stared at the ornate envelope in my hand, the embossed gold letters glimmering under the soft light of the living room chandelier. It felt like a joke, like an insult wrapped in velvet. I turned it over slowly, feeling the weight of my family's expectations pressing down on me. The family was gathered around the Christmas tree, laughter echoing in the background as they exchanged gifts, luxury scarves, designer handbags, expensive gadgets. I could barely bring myself to join in the celebration. My sister, Charlotte, was opening the last of her presents, her eyes sparkling as she tore into a velvet box. A 5-star vacation to Paris. Her dream trip. The kind of gift that only the privileged could afford, and she was already texting friends about how it was the best gift she'd ever received. Meanwhile, I had been dealing with my own set of struggles for years, trying to keep my small business afloat, scraping by with the bare minimum, working multiple jobs to pay the rent. I'd lost count of the sleepless nights, the endless work with nothing to show for it. But none of that mattered to them. In their eyes, I was just the overly ambitious daughter who couldn't seem to figure things out, always chasing things I could never have. My father, seated at the head of the table, barely looked up from his phone when he called me over. He handed me the envelope without even acknowledging my presence beyond a brief glance. "You've been working too hard," he muttered, not even bothering to hide the disinterest in his tone. "Charlotte deserves this trip more than anyone, but for you, this should help." His words stung more than the gift itself. I opened the envelope, my fingers trembling. A slip of paper fluttered out, a discount coupon for a local spa, $50 off. My eyes widened in disbelief. $50. For a spa treatment? It was a laughable gesture, a hollow attempt at generosity. I looked up at them, all of them, still laughing, still glowing from their extravagant gifts. Charlotte, now on her phone with a glass of wine in hand, shot me a quick, judgmental look. It was clear she was already annoyed by my presence, my struggles, my lack of success. It always bothered her that I couldn't just be content, that I wanted more than what they thought I deserved. "Come on, don't be so dramatic," she chuckled, her voice dripping with condescension. "You'll love it. I mean, it's a spa. You can't complain." Her words, casual and dismissive, echoed in my head, amplifying the sting. I'd spent years trying to prove myself to this family, trying to show them that I wasn't a failure. But to them, it didn't matter what I did or how hard I worked. Success, in their eyes, was about appearances, about luxury, about the right name, the right position. I glanced over at my mother, who sat across the table with that signature tight-lipped smile, the one she always gave when something wasn't worth her time. "It's practical, sweetheart," she said, her tone matter-of-fact. "You've always been a bit too intense. Maybe you should relax for a change." I wanted to say something, to argue that my life wasn't some joke, that every single day was a battle. But instead, I forced a smile. I looked at the coupon, at the cheap ink, at the entire absurdity of the situation. My family's idea of generosity, of love, felt like an insult. But worse than the insult was the feeling of being invisible, of being so far removed from their world of privilege and ease. I stared at that coupon again. My pulse raced. This wasn't just about the gift. It wasn't about the spa or the $50. This was about the years of being overlooked, of being told time and time again that I wasn't good enough, that my dreams were too big, too unrealistic. I could feel the anger rising within me, but it wasn't just anger. It was the kind of quiet rage that comes from years of frustration, the kind of rage that you bury deep inside because you know, it won't change anything. But today was different. I could feel it, the shift, the change. I had worked too hard for too long to let them think I was still the same person they could dismiss. They thought they had the power. They thought they were in control. But they didn't know the half of it. They didn't know what I had built behind the scenes. I stood up, holding the coupon in one hand. "Thanks, Dad. This is thoughtful," I said, my voice steady, controlled. I didn't wait for their response. Instead, I turned and walked toward the door, my heart pounding in my chest, the weight of what I was about to do settling in. Tomorrow, everything would change. Tomorrow, they would find out exactly who they had been underestimating, and I couldn't wait to see the look on their faces. The cold winter air hit me as I stepped outside, a sharp contrast to the warmth of the house I had just left behind. I drew in a deep breath, trying to steady my racing heart. I wasn't sure if it was the anger, the excitement, or the sheer relief that was making my pulse race. But something deep inside me knew I was standing at a turning point in my life. I hadn't been the one to initiate this. I hadn't asked for this, but my family's disregard for my worth had forced my hand. The path they'd tried to keep me on, the one where I was nothing more than a disappointment, had ended tonight. I pulled my phone from my bag and checked the notification that had popped up just moments before I'd left the house. A quick glance at the screen showed the message I had been waiting for. Acquisition finalized. My fingers tightened around the phone as a slow, satisfying smile spread across my face. I had done it. I had outsmarted them all. The company I had quietly been building, the one they had all dismissed, was now mine. Not in some abstract way, not in some future sense, but in a real, tangible, undeniable sense. I now owned a majority share in Van Becker Enterprises, the very company that had been the cornerstone of my father's empire, the one my brother Liam had inherited and boasted about for years. I could almost hear their voices, still ringing in my ears as I walked down the street. "You're always struggling. Why don't you just accept what's in front of you? You'll never get what Liam has." But I had done it. I had worked in silence, pouring every ounce of my energy, my focus, into the one thing they never thought I could achieve. Every hour I spent away from the family, every job I worked, every investment I made was for this moment. My phone vibrated in my hand. It was Jacob, my business partner. His name flashed on the screen, and I didn't hesitate to answer. "Is it done?" I asked, my voice calm, but the weight of my words heavy with meaning. "Yeah, it's all set. The acquisition is official. It's yours," he replied, his voice steady and assured. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the realization wash over me. "Perfect," I whispered to myself. I had spent years building this, and not just the company. I had built my future brick by brick, while they saw me as a joke. They saw me as the one who couldn't handle life, the one who needed rescuing. But now, the tables had turned. Now, I was the one with the power. I was the one who held the strings, and tomorrow they would all know it. I looked down at the cheap $50 spa coupon still in my hand. The irony hit me all over again. This pathetic scrap of paper, this token of their shallow affection, would soon be the last reminder of how little they had ever truly understood me. But as much as I wanted to laugh, I didn't. No, I wasn't here for petty revenge. This was about more than that. It was about showing them, showing myself, that their version of success was a lie, that the real power, the real control, was never in their hands. It was mine. I could already picture my father's face when he learned that his empire, the one he'd built and passed down to Liam, was now mine. It wasn't just about the money. It wasn't about the ownership. It was about control. Control that they thought they could monopolize. Control that they thought would forever belong to them. But as I walked down the cold street, the city lights casting long shadows on the sidewalk, I knew that they wouldn't see it coming. Tomorrow, everything would change. Tomorrow, they would learn who I really was. And for the first time in my life, I would no longer be the invisible one. I would be the one they had no choice but to respect. I pulled out my phone again, swiping through the messages. There it was, a final notification from Jacob. Press release goes live at 9 a.m. Get ready. Tomorrow would be the day they woke up to the truth. Tomorrow would be the day they realized just how wrong they had been about me. They wouldn't see it coming, but I did, and it felt damn good. The morning was cold, but it didn't matter. The city was already buzzing with energy, and the press release I had scheduled was about to change everything. I stood in front of my apartment's full-length windows, looking out over the skyline of Manhattan. The towering buildings, the rush of cars, the endless flow of people. It had always been my dream to be a part of this world, but I had been dismissed, told I wasn't cut out for it. They thought I wasn't capable of playing their game, that I was too small, too insignificant. But now, I wasn't just a bystander in this world. I was about to dominate it. I took a deep breath and checked the time. It was nearly 8:30 a.m. The press release would go live in 30 minutes. I knew the family wouldn't be expecting anything, especially not today. They had no idea that I was in control. I could already picture my father's reaction, the disbelief in his eyes when he learned what I had done. He had always told me that success came from power, from building an empire, from taking what you were owed. But what he never realized was that I had been quietly building my empire for years. He had underestimated me, thinking I was just another one of his failures. Today, I was going to prove him wrong. I reached for my phone and opened up my email. There it was, the notification from Jacob. The deal was done. The acquisition of Van Becker Enterprises was now official. The company I had quietly taken control of, the one my brother Liam had inherited through his connections and his privileged position, was now in my hands. I smirked, tapping my phone to lock it. It was done. No one could take that away from me now. The phone rang just as I stepped into the elevator. It was Jacob again. I could hear the excitement in his voice as he greeted me. "See, it's happening. The board members have already started to reach out to Liam. They know the deal's done. He's losing his mind over it," Jacob said, his voice barely containing his laughter. I couldn't help but chuckle. The idea of Liam, the golden child, the one who had everything handed to him on a silver platter, scrambling for answers, was a small but satisfying victory in itself. "Good," I replied, trying to keep my voice calm, though I could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on me. Let him panic. He deserves it. When the elevator doors opened, I stepped into the lobby of the building. I didn't bother to smile or acknowledge anyone as I walked past the reception desk. Everyone who had worked with my family, those who had believed in their legacy, would soon realize that the game had changed. I wasn't just another daughter trying to get in on the action. I had outsmarted them all, and now I was about to walk into that boardroom and take what was mine. The building felt different now. It wasn't their domain anymore. It was mine. The elevator door opened to the executive floor, and I stepped out into the sleek, polished hallway. It was eerily quiet, and I couldn't help but smile. Everyone in the building had no idea who I really was. They knew me as Liam's little sister, the one who was always hanging around but never quite fitting in. They didn't know that I was the one pulling the strings now. The conference room was set up, the board members already seated, nervously whispering to each other. When I walked in, all eyes turned to me, their expressions a mix of confusion and curiosity. I wasn't supposed to be here. This was Liam's territory. But today, it wasn't his anymore. As I walked toward the head of the table, I felt a surge of confidence. Every step I took was another reminder of how far I had come and how little they had believed in me. Liam was already there, his suit slightly wrinkled, his usual confident smirk replaced by an expression I couldn't quite place. Fear, maybe? He stood up when he saw me and took a step toward me. He clearly didn't know what was coming. I could see the uncertainty in his eyes, the cracks in his usually unshakable facade. "What the hell are you doing here?" he snapped, his voice tense. I didn't even flinch. I just smiled and took my seat at the head of the table. The rest of the board members exchanged uncomfortable glances, unsure of what to say or do. "I'm here for the meeting," I replied smoothly, keeping my voice calm. "But before we start, I have something to show you." I slid a manila folder across the table, making sure everyone could see it. It was the acquisition papers, the ones that proved I now owned the majority share of the company. Liam's face drained of color as he looked down at the documents, his fingers trembling as he flipped through the pages. He looked up at me, his expression one of disbelief, his voice cracking as he spoke. You can't do this. This isn't real." I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms over my chest. "It's very real, Liam," I said, my voice steady, "and I'm here to run this company now." The room fell silent. There was no one left to stop me. I had done it. I had finally taken control of the company that was supposed to be his. And now it was mine. The silence in the room was deafening as Liam continued to stare at the papers in his hand, disbelief written all over his face. I could see the wheels turning in his mind, trying to process what had just happened, trying to figure out how he had lost everything in a matter of seconds. The board members were no better, shifting uncomfortably in their seats, not sure whether to congratulate me or remain silent in the face of what felt like a betrayal. Liam finally looked up, his eyes wild, his voice rising in frustration. "You think you can just come in here and take everything from me? You're not even qualified for this. You don't understand what it takes to run this company." I met his gaze, calm and collected, not letting his words rattle me. "It doesn't matter what you think, Liam. I've been building my own version of this company for years, working in the background, making moves you never even noticed. It wasn't about credentials. It was about vision, strategy, and hard work. Things you've never had to worry about." His face twisted with anger, his knuckles white from gripping the papers too hard. The smugness that had once defined him was completely gone, replaced by a desperate need to regain control. It was almost sad, watching him try to salvage a situation that was already over. "Dad will fix this," Liam spat, his voice shaking. "He's the one with the real power. He'll make sure you're not in charge." I could feel a flicker of doubt, but I quickly suppressed it. I wasn't just fighting Liam. I was fighting years of dismissal, of underestimation, of being told I wasn't good enough. I had built this, and no one, not even my father, could take it away from me now. I leaned forward in my chair, making sure to keep my voice steady, to show him that I wasn't intimidated. "Your father," I said slowly, savoring each word, "doesn't have the same influence anymore. And as for you, you're a liability." The words hung in the air, and for a moment, the tension in the room thickened. The board members exchanged nervous glances, unsure of how to react to this unexpected power shift. They had been so accustomed to Liam's dominance that they hadn't even considered the possibility that someone else could take control. Liam's face was pale, his breath coming in quick, shallow gasps. He opened his mouth to argue, but faltered, unsure of what to say next. I could see the cracks in his armor now. He was terrified, and the realization was almost too satisfying. But this wasn't about revenge. It was about showing him, and everyone else, that I was more than what they had assumed. The moment stretched on, and I could feel the room waiting for me to make my next move. Finally, I reached into my bag and pulled out another document. I slid it across the table toward the board members. "This," I said, "is my plan for restructuring the company. We're moving forward. Under my leadership, we're going to be more profitable, more innovative. We're going to leave the past behind." Liam looked down at the document, his face going from white to a deep shade of red as he scanned the page. "You can't do this," he muttered. "This is my company. I built it." "No," I replied, my voice cutting through the room like a knife. "You inherited it. I built something real." The words seemed to sink in, and I could see Liam's confidence slipping away with each passing second. The power had shifted, and he knew it. But there was still one more thing I needed to do to make sure he understood the full weight of what I had just taken from him. I reached for my phone, the screen lighting up with a new message from Jacob. I glanced at it quickly and then turned it toward Liam, placing it on the table in front of him. The message was clear. SEC has been notified. The financial audit is underway. Liam's eyes went wide as he read the message, and his mouth fell open in shock. The silence in the room was suffocating as he processed what had just been revealed. I leaned back in my chair, giving him time to absorb the weight of my next move. The SEC was already investigating the financial discrepancies I had discovered in Van Becker's accounts, discrepancies that Liam had been covering up for years. It wasn't just about a hostile takeover anymore. This was about exposing the rot at the core of the company, and it was all his doing. "I've already alerted the authorities," I said coolly, my voice steady, unwavering. "There's a lot more going on here than you think, and trust me, this is only the beginning." Liam's face was a mix of fury and fear. He stood up abruptly, knocking his chair over in the process. "You think you've won?" he hissed, his fists clenched by his sides. "You think you're better than me?" I looked him dead in the eye, not flinching, not backing down. "I know I am," I said simply, my voice calm but filled with a quiet power that I had never had before. "You never understood what it took to build something that lasts. But I do." He opened his mouth to respond, but before he could say another word, the door to the conference room opened, and 2 security guards stepped in. The tension in the room spiked immediately as they moved toward Liam, their expressions unreadable. "Mr. Monroe," one of the guards said in a flat voice, "we need you to come with us." Liam froze. His mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. The reality of what was happening seemed to crash down on him all at once. He had lost everything: the company, his position, and now his freedom. "Dad will fix this," he muttered, almost to himself. As he was escorted out of the room, his face a mask of disbelief and humiliation. I stood up, smoothing my blazer, my heart racing. This was it. This was the moment I had been working toward for so long. I had taken control, and there was no going back. As I watched the doors close behind Liam, I couldn't help but feel a surge of satisfaction. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just surviving. I was in charge. The moment the door clicked shut behind Liam, I exhaled slowly, a weight lifting off my shoulders. The room was still, the air thick with the aftermath of everything that had just unfolded. The board members sat frozen, staring at the empty doorway where Liam had just been escorted out. No one spoke. They were all too stunned, too shaken by the sudden shift in power. I turned toward them, finally breaking the silence. "Now that we've cleaned house," I began, my voice calm but filled with a newfound authority, "let's talk about the future." The board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats, their eyes darting nervously between one another. They had been loyal to Liam, loyal to my father, but now they were faced with a decision. They knew they had no choice but to align themselves with me, to accept the reality that the old guard was gone, and a new era had begun. I've already laid out a plan for restructuring, I continued, sliding the papers toward them. We're going to focus on long-term growth, on sustainability, no more shortcuts, no more living off inherited success. I let the words sink in, watching as some of the board members nodded in agreement. Others still looked unsure, but it didn't matter. The power was in my hands now, and I would make the changes I saw fit. A few minutes passed before someone spoke up, breaking the tension. "You're serious about this," one of the senior members said, a look of respect in his eyes. "We're with you." I didn't need to hear more. The shift had been made, and it was undeniable. I stood up, my heels clicking against the marble floor as I walked toward the door. "Good," I said over my shoulder, my voice steady. "Let's make sure we move quickly. Time is money." As I stepped out of the conference room, I felt a sense of satisfaction that I couldn't quite put into words. I wasn't just walking out of that room with control of the company. I was walking out with something far more important: respect. Respect from people who had once dismissed me, who had once laughed at me for dreaming too big. But now they couldn't ignore me anymore. I glanced at my phone as I walked down the hallway. Another message from Jacob. "Everything's going according to plan. You're in charge now." It felt good, damn good, but as much as I had won, I knew that this was only the beginning. The fight for control, for power, was far from over. My father wasn't done fighting for his empire, and Liam's defeat was just the first step in the war. But for the first time in my life, I didn't feel afraid. I felt ready, ready for whatever came next. The elevator ride down felt almost surreal. The quiet hum of the machinery was the only sound, but in my mind, the world was exploding. Liam had been escorted out. The company was officially mine, and for the first time in years, I could breathe. No more pretending, no more hiding. The work I had done, the battles I had fought, the quiet sacrifices, they had all led to this moment. I stepped out of the building, the crisp air hitting me as I made my way toward the car. I was finally free from the weight of my family's expectations, free from the need to prove myself to them. But there was still one thing left to do. One more step in this journey to reclaim my life. I could feel the anticipation building inside me. I arrived at my penthouse, the doorman holding the door open for me as I entered the building. I didn't feel the need to hide anymore. The family who had always looked down on me, the ones who thought I was destined to fail, would soon find out how wrong they had been. I opened the door to my apartment and walked straight into the living room where Jacob was waiting for me. A bottle of champagne was sitting on the table, ready to be uncorked. He looked up when I entered, a grin spreading across his face. "Well?" he asked, holding up the bottle. "Did you do it?" I smiled, a genuine smile for the first time in what felt like forever. "I did," I said simply. "It's done." Jacob poured the champagne into 2 glasses and handed me one. We clinked our glasses together, and I let the moment sink in. For so long, I had fought for something that seemed out of reach. But now I had it all. The power, the control, the respect. It wasn't just about money or business. It was about proving to myself that I was worthy, worthy of success, worthy of their respect. "Here's to new beginnings," Jacob said, his eyes gleaming with pride. "To new beginnings," I repeated, my voice steady and filled with a quiet confidence. I leaned back in my chair, looking out at the skyline through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The city stretched out before me, endless and full of possibilities, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I truly belonged here. The family who had dismissed me, who had laughed at me, who had tried to bury my potential, they hadn't seen anything yet. I wasn't done. This was just the beginning.